Three executives got arrested on a Tuesday morning while 200 employees watched from their cubicles. The CFO was crying. Actually crying. Mascara running down her face as they walked her past the reception desk, where she used to tap her keycard like she owned the building. Because she thought she did. But here's the thing. None of this would have happened without a quiet accountant named Chen, who everyone underestimated. A guy who spent 11 years being invisible. A guy who found something he was never supposed to find. But to understand how we got here, I need to take you back 14 months. To the day Marcus first noticed something was wrong with the numbers. Chen was 43 years old and had worked at Bellwright Manufacturing for 11 years. 11 years of arriving at 7:45 a.m., leaving at 5:30 p.m., eating the same turkey sandwich at his desk, and never once being late on a single report. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't political. He was just good at his job. Really good. The kind of good where you notice when a number is off by 0.3% because it feels wrong before you can even prove it. Bellwright Manufacturing made industrial valves. Not exciting, I know. But these weren't your garden variety valves. These were specialised pressure valves for oil refineries, chemical plants, nuclear facilities. The kind of valves where if something goes wrong, people die. The company had about 400 employees and did roughly $180 million in revenue annually. Marcus managed the cost accounting division, which meant he tracked every penny that went into making those valves. Raw materials, labour, overhead, quality testing. He had a wife named Linda, 2 kids in high school, and a mortgage with 16 years left on it. He drove a 7-year-old Honda Accord and brought coffee from home because he thought $6 lattes were ridiculous. Marcus was, by every measure, a good man living a quiet life. And then Patricia Vance showed up. Patricia was hired as the new VP of Finance in March of that year. She came from a competitor, brought in by the CEO with promises of streamlining operations and driving shareholder value. You know the type. MBA from a school she mentioned in every conversation. Vocabulary full of words like synergy and bandwidth and circle back. She was 41, impeccably dressed, and smiled in a way that never quite reached her eyes. On her first day, she walked through the accounting department and stopped at Marcus's desk. "You must be Marcus Chen," she said. "I've heard you're the institutional knowledge around here." Marcus looked up from his spreadsheets. "I've been here a while, yes." 11 years. She said it like it was a disease. That's a long time to stay in one place. Don't you ever want to grow? Now, some of you might already feel a chill, because that question, that wasn't curiosity. That was a threat dressed up in business casual. Marcus just smiled. Politely. "I like what I do." Patricia's lips twitched. "We'll see about expanding your horizons." She walked away. And Marcus went back to his spreadsheets. Because he didn't play political games. He just did his job. That was his first mistake. Over the next 3 months, Patricia restructured the entire finance department. She brought in 2 of her people from her old company. She implemented new reporting software that nobody asked for. She started requiring weekly status meetings that accomplished nothing except making everyone perform productivity for an audience. And she started asking Marcus for reports he'd never had to produce before. Detailed breakdowns of vendor relationships. Historical analysis of cost variances going back 5 years. Documentation of every approval process for material purchases. At first, Marcus thought she was just getting up to speed, learning the business, being thorough. But the requests kept coming, and they kept getting stranger. "I need the original invoices for the Kramer Steel account from 2019 through 2021. I need you to reconcile the discrepancy between our internal material costs and what we reported to the auditors in Q3 of last year. I need you to pull every expense report Victor Walsh has submitted in the past 18 months. Victor Walsh was the CFO, Patricia's boss. And Marcus started to realise something. Patricia wasn't learning the business. She was looking for something. Now, there's a detail about Patricia I haven't told you yet. Something I learned later that reframed everything. But I'll get to that. First, you need to understand what Marcus found in October. It was a Thursday. Marcus was reconciling the quarterly materials report, same as he'd done 43 times before. And he noticed something in the raw steel costs. The numbers didn't match. According to the purchase orders, Bellwright had bought $2.3 million worth of specialty steel from a supplier called Meridian Metals in the third quarter. But according to the actual inventory counts and production records, they'd only received about $1.4 million worth of material. A $900,000 discrepancy. Marcus blinked at the screen. He ran the numbers again, then again. Same result. Now, discrepancies happen. A miskeyed invoice, a delayed shipment counted in the wrong quarter, a data entry error. Marcus had seen it all. But $900,000? That wasn't a typo. That was a pattern. He started digging, quietly, after hours. He pulled records from the past 3 years and started mapping Meridian Metals transactions against actual inventory receipts. And what he found made his stomach drop. Over 36 months, Bellwright had paid Meridian Metals approximately $14.2 million for raw materials. But the actual materials received totaled roughly $8.7 million. $5.5 million had vanished. Let me be clear about what this means. Someone at Bellwright was paying for materials that didn't exist, and that money was going somewhere. Marcus sat at his desk at 9 p.m. on a Thursday night, and for the first time in 11 years, he didn't know what to do. He could go to Patricia, but Patricia was new and he didn't trust her. Something about the way she'd been asking for those specific reports made him nervous. He could go to Victor Walsh, the CFO, but Victor had been here for 8 years. If something this big was happening, Victor either knew about it or was incompetent. Neither option was comforting. He could go to HR, but HR reported to the CEO, and the CEO had hired Patricia specifically, and Marcus was starting to wonder if that wasn't a coincidence. He went home. He didn't tell Linda. He barely slept. And the next morning, he made a decision that would change everything. He decided to keep digging. Quietly. Carefully. Without telling anyone. Because Marcus Chen had spent 11 years being invisible. And for the first time, he realised that invisibility could be a weapon. Over the next 6 weeks, Marcus built a shadow investigation. He came in early, he stayed late, he requested records under the guise of routine audits and year-end preparation. And he found more. Meridian Metals wasn't the only suspicious vendor. There was a company called Precision Alloy Partners that had received $3.8 million over 2 years for specialty coatings that the production floor had no record of ever using. There was a consulting firm called Strategic Operations Group that had billed $1.2 million for process optimization services that nobody in operations had ever heard of. The total, when Marcus finished his analysis, came to approximately $11.4 million in payments for goods and services that either didn't exist or were dramatically overpriced. $11.4 million. And every single payment had been approved by Victor Walsh. Now, you might think this is where Marcus went to the authorities, called the FBI, became a whistleblower hero. But Marcus wasn't stupid. He knew how these things worked. He knew that big accusations required bulletproof evidence. He knew that powerful people protected each other. And he knew that the messenger often got destroyed before the message was ever delivered. So he kept digging. It was November 15th, a Wednesday. Marcus was looking for historical approval documentation in the basement archive when he found it. A box labelled Finance, Legacy Records, 2018. He almost didn't open it. It was supposed to contain old budget proposals, routine stuff. But something made him pull off the lid. And inside, under 3 inches of boring spreadsheets, he found a folder with no label. Inside that folder was a handwritten ledger. Not printed, handwritten, in neat, precise script. It had dates, names, dollar amounts, account numbers in the Cayman Islands. It was, quite literally, the second ledger. And at the bottom of the last page, in the same handwriting, was a signature. Victor Walsh. Marcus sat on the cold concrete floor of that archive room and felt his entire understanding of Bellwright Manufacturing collapse. Victor Walsh wasn't just approving fraudulent payments. He was running the entire scheme. The fake vendors, the shell companies, the offshore accounts, all of it. And based on the dates in this ledger, he'd been doing it for at least 7 years. But here's the part that still gives me chills. And honestly, if this story is hitting different for you right now, subscribe, because tomorrow's story makes this one look tame. But anyway, Marcus kept reading. Because the ledger didn't just have Victor's name. It had 3 other names. 3 other people receiving payments from those offshore accounts. The CEO, Richard Bellwright. The founder's grandson. The man whose name was literally on the building. The CFO's assistant. A woman named Denise Harper, who handled all of Victor's expense reports. And Patricia Vance. Patricia Vance had been receiving payments from those Cayman accounts for 4 years. But Patricia had only worked at Bellwright for 8 months, which meant Patricia had been on Victor's payroll while she was still working at their competitor. She wasn't brought in to streamline operations. She was brought in because she was already part of the scheme. And all those strange reports she'd been asking Marcus to compile? She wasn't investigating anything. She was checking to make sure no one else had noticed. Marcus had been feeding information to the person who was most invested in making sure he never found the truth. He took photos of every page with his personal phone. He put the folder back exactly where he found it. He walked out of that archive room at a normal pace, said goodnight to the security guard, and drove home with his hands shaking on the wheel. That night, he told Linda everything. And Linda, bless her, said the thing that changed the trajectory of everything. If you go to the authorities now, they'll bury you. You need leverage, you need allies, and you need to make sure you're protected before you fire a single shot. Linda had spent 20 years as a paralegal. She knew how corporations destroyed whistleblowers. She knew about retaliation, about legal intimidation, about how the truth didn't matter if you couldn't afford to prove it. So they made a plan. Step 1, secure the evidence. Marcus made multiple copies of everything: photos, spreadsheets, his analysis. He put 1 copy in their home safe, 1 copy in a safety deposit box, and 1 copy with Linda's brother, a lawyer in Portland who specialized in employment law. Step 2, document everything. From that day forward, Marcus kept a detailed log of every interaction with Patricia, Victor, and anyone else involved. Dates, times, exact quotes. He sent himself emails summarizing each day's events, creating a time-stamped record. Step 3, find allies. Marcus wasn't the only person at Bellwright who'd been mistreated. He started paying attention to who else Patricia had targeted. Who else had been pushed out, passed over, or pressured? And that's when he found Derek. Derek Okonkwo was a senior quality assurance engineer who'd been with Bellwright for 16 years. 3 months before Marcus found the ledger, Derek had been placed on a performance improvement plan by Patricia. The stated reason? Failure to adapt to new reporting requirements. The real reason, as far as Derek could tell, was that he'd asked too many questions about why quality testing costs had doubled in the past 2 years. Marcus approached him carefully, casually, asked how he was handling the PIP. And Derek, exhausted and bitter, said something that confirmed Marcus's suspicions. You want to know what's funny? I ran those quality numbers myself. We're not spending more on testing. We're spending less. But somehow the budget shows double? Someone's cooking the books, Marcus. And they put me on a PIP so I'd... Stop asking about it. Marcus made a decision. What if I told you I could prove it? Derek became Marcus's first ally. And then they found 2 more. Sandra from Accounts Payable, who'd noticed that certain vendor payments bypassed normal approval channels, and James from IT, who'd been asked by Patricia to delete email archives from 3 years ago and had quietly made copies before doing so. 4 people. 4 quiet, invisible employees who'd been overlooked and underestimated. 4 people who were about to bring down a $180 million company. Now here's where some people would have gone straight to the FBI, but Marcus had thought this through. He knew that corporate fraud cases took years. He knew that whistleblowers often faced retaliation before any investigation could protect them. And he knew that Victor Walsh had connections, lawyers, resources. If Marcus walked into an FBI field office with his evidence, 3 things would happen. Bellwright's lawyers would immediately discredit him. Patricia would fabricate a reason to fire him, and Victor would have months, maybe years, to destroy evidence and cover his tracks. Marcus needed to do this differently. He spent 2 weeks preparing a package, not for the FBI, not yet, for 3 different recipients who would receive it simultaneously. Recipient 1, the investigative journalism team at the Wall Street Journal, specifically a reporter named Catherine Oyalaran, who had broken 3 corporate fraud stories in the past 2 years. Recipient 2, the SEC whistleblower program, with a formal complaint and all supporting documentation. Recipient 3, a law firm specializing in qui tam cases, which allowed whistleblowers to receive a percentage of any funds recovered in fraud cases involving federal contracts. And here's the key. Bellwright Manufacturing supplied valves to the Department of Defense, which meant Victor's fraud wasn't just corporate theft, it was federal contract fraud, a felony. Marcus didn't send those packages immediately, because there was one more piece he needed. See, the handwritten ledger was damning, but a good defense lawyer would argue it was fabricated, that Marcus had created it himself to frame innocent executives. He needed Victor to confirm it, on record. And that meant Marcus had to do something incredibly risky. He had to confront Patricia Vance. Not directly, not yet. But he needed to provoke a reaction that would be documented. So, on December 3rd, Marcus did something he'd never done in 11 years. He made a mistake on purpose. He submitted a quarterly report with a small error. An error that, if anyone looked closely, would show a discrepancy in the Meridian Metals account. Nothing obvious, nothing that would alarm a normal reviewer, but something that Patricia would definitely notice. Because Patricia was watching those accounts like a hawk. And Marcus was right. The next morning, Patricia was at his desk before he'd finished his first cup of coffee. "We need to talk about your Q4 report." Marcus looked up, carefully neutral. Is there a problem? You tell me. There's a variance in the Meridian Materials reconciliation. Almost $40,000 you can't account for. Now here's the thing. The actual variance was $43,000. But Marcus had documented that he'd flagged $41,000 in his internal notes, which meant Patricia had just revealed that she knew the exact figure. She'd been reviewing those accounts herself. Privately. Off the books. I'll review it, Marcus said. Must have been a data entry issue. Patricia leaned in close enough that he could smell her perfume, something expensive that didn't match the fluorescent lights and grey cubicles. You're very good at your job, Marcus. 11 years of perfect work. It would be a shame if your performance started slipping now. That wasn't a warning. That was a threat. Marcus documented everything. The exact time, the exact words, the implied threat. He added it to his file. But Patricia wasn't finished. 2 days later, Marcus received an email from HR. He was being placed on a performance improvement plan. The stated reason? Recurring errors in financial reporting and failure to meet accuracy standards. The document was signed by Patricia Vance and Victor Walsh. I don't know about you, but this is the part that makes my blood boil. 11 years of perfect work, not a single disciplinary issue. And suddenly, Marcus was on. A PIP for one manufactured error that Patricia herself had planted the seeds to find. This is how it works. This is how they destroy people. Not with firing squads, but with paper trails, documentation, death by 1,000 HR cuts. But Marcus wasn't like other targets, because Marcus had been building his own paper trail, and it was about to explode. He called Derek that night, and Sandra, and James. They're accelerating. We need to move now. The four of them met at James's house. They reviewed everything one final time. And then Marcus did something that took more courage than anything else in this entire story. He walked into Victor Walsh's office the next morning and asked for a meeting. Victor Walsh was 58 years old, with silver hair, a permanent golf tan, and the easy confidence of someone who'd never been told no. He waved Marcus to a chair with the casual authority of a man who believed he was untouchable. Marcus, what can I do for you? I want to talk about Meridian Metals. Victor's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes went very, very still. What about it? I've been reviewing the historical accounts, and I found some discrepancies. Material discrepancies. I thought you should know before the external auditors find them. The silence lasted 4 seconds. Marcus counted. Then Victor smiled. It was the kind of smile that made you understand how predators must feel when prey wanders too close. That's very diligent of you, Marcus. What kind of discrepancies are we talking about? Payments that don't match receipts, vendors that don't seem to exist, that kind of thing. Victor leaned back in his chair. I see. And you brought this to me because? Because your signature is on all of them. The temperature in that room dropped 10 degrees. That's a very serious accusation, Marcus. I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm just telling you what I found. And I thought you'd want the chance to explain it before anyone else sees it. Victor walked around his desk. Slowly. He stopped about 2 feet from Marcus's chair. You've been here 11 years. You've always been smart. So I'm going to assume you're being smart now, and I'm going to give you some advice. He leaned down until his face was level with Marcus's. Let it go. Whatever you think you found, you're wrong. And if you pursue this, you will lose. Not just your job, everything. Your reputation, your family's security, everything. Marcus didn't blink. Is that a threat? Victor smiled again, that same predator smile. It's an observation. My observations are the documentation around here, Marcus. That's how this works. And there it was. Victor Walsh had just confirmed, on a recording device hidden in Marcus's jacket pocket, that he viewed himself as above accountability, that his word was law, that he could destroy anyone who challenged him. That recording would become Exhibit 47 in the federal prosecution. Marcus walked out of that office with his heart pounding so hard he thought it might explode. But he kept his face neutral. He went back to his desk. He saved the recording to 3 separate cloud accounts. And then he made 3 phone calls. To Catherine Oyalaran at the Wall Street Journal, to the SEC whistleblower hotline, to the law firm in Portland. The packages went out that afternoon. What happened next was a masterclass in coordinated destruction. Catherine Oyalaran was a pit bull. Within 48 hours, she'd verified enough of Marcus's documentation to start making calls. She reached out to Meridian Metals, which turned out to be a shell company registered in Delaware with a single employee who was actually Victor Walsh's brother-in-law. She called Precision Alloy Partners, which had the same Delaware address. She called Strategic Operations Group, which was registered to a P.O. box in Nevada that also received payments from 3 other companies facing fraud investigations. Meanwhile, the SEC opened a formal investigation. They issued subpoenas for Bellwright's financial records going back 6 years. They froze certain accounts pending review. And the law firm filed a key tam lawsuit under seal, which meant the federal government now had first dibs on prosecuting the case. Victor Walsh never saw it coming. The Wall Street Journal story broke on a Friday morning with the headline, Bellwright Manufacturing, accused of multi-year contract fraud, 3 executives named. By Friday afternoon, Bellwright's stock had dropped 34%. By Friday evening, the SEC had expanded their investigation. By Saturday morning, the FBI had opened their own case. And by Monday, at 9:47 a.m., federal agents walked into Bellwright Manufacturing's corporate headquarters with warrants for Victor Walsh, Richard Bellwright, and Patricia Vance. Remember how I started this story? 3 executives in handcuffs, Patricia crying, 200 employees watching. That was this moment. But here's the part that makes this story legendary. As the agents walked Patricia Vance past Marcus's desk, she stopped. Actually stopped, despite the agent's hand on her arm. She looked at Marcus. And Marcus, for the first time in 11 years, allowed himself to smile. I guess your observations weren't enough documentation after all, he said. Patricia's face contorted into something ugly. You think you've won? You have no idea what's coming for you. The agent tugged her arm. Ma'am, we need to keep moving. As they led her away, Marcus called after her. Actually, I do. It's called a whistleblower settlement. Turns out there's a percentage for that. The federal investigation took 18 months. The evidence Marcus and his team had compiled proved central to the prosecution. The handwritten ledger, the recording of Victor's threat, the email archives James had saved, the payment anomalies Sandra had documented, all of it wove together into an airtight case. Victor Walsh was convicted on 14 counts of wire fraud, 3 counts of federal contract fraud, and 2 counts of money laundering. He was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. Richard Bellwright, the CEO, claimed he didn't know about the scheme. The jury didn't believe him. He got 8 years. Patricia Vance cut a deal. She testified against the others in exchange for a reduced sentence. She got 4 years and a lifetime ban from serving as an officer of any publicly traded company. Denise Harper, Victor's assistant, got 18 months and 3 years probation. But here's what happened to Marcus. Under the key term provisions of the False Claims Act, whistleblowers are entitled to between 15 and 30% of any funds the government recovers in cases involving fraud against federal contracts. The government recovered $47.03 million from Bellwright Manufacturing, the individual defendants, and related parties. Marcus Chen received 22% of that recovery, $10.4 million. Let me repeat that. The quiet accountant who ate the same turkey sandwich every day, who drove a 7-year-old Honda, who never asked for recognition or advancement, that man received $10 million for doing the right thing. But it wasn't just about the money. Derek Okonkwo, who'd been placed on that fraudulent PIP, he was promoted to head of quality assurance at the restructured company. They removed the PIP from his record and gave him a formal apology. Sandra from Accounts Payable was offered a senior position in the new finance leadership team. James from IT received his own whistleblower share, smaller than Marcus's but still substantial. He used it to start his own cybersecurity consulting firm. And what about Bellwright Manufacturing? The company survived, barely. The board forced out everyone connected to the program scandal and brought in new leadership. They implemented the compliance controls Marcus had suggested in his original documentation. And they named a conference room after him. Okay, they didn't actually name a room after him. I made that part up, but they should have. The last time anyone heard from Marcus Chen, he was consulting for other companies on fraud prevention, charging $500 an hour to teach executives how not to end up in handcuffs. The irony wasn't lost on him. I think about this story a lot, because it's not really about the money or the convictions or even the revenge. It's about what happens when you underestimate the quiet people. The ones who show up every day and do their jobs and don't make waves. Those are the ones keeping track. Those are the ones who notice when the numbers don't add up. And those are the ones who, when pushed far enough, can bring the whole house of cards down. Victor Walsh thought his observations were the only documentation that mattered. He was wrong. If you've ever had a boss who thought they were untouchable, I want to hear about it. What's the worst thing you've watched a manager do thinking no one was keeping track? The stories people send me keep getting wilder. Subscribe if you want to hear what drops next. Some of these I genuinely can't believe are real. Marcus Chen believed in the numbers, and in the end, the numbers believed in him.